Glad to have you back. Now, Nigeria's Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Burate, has again charged troops to capture Abubakar Shekau, the factional leader of the Boko Haram terrorist group, dead or alive. Burate gave the charge at Camp Zero, the former command and control center of the terrorist group in Sambisa Forest, during an operational visit to the troops.
In 2017, the Army chief gave troops a 40-day ultimatum to capture Shekau and recently offered a 3 million naira reward for information on him. As a matter of fact, that's a marked departure from other bounties that have been placed on Shekau's head, that ran into hundreds of millions of naira. I wonder what that in itself means about the value of Shekau. Well, we have joining us in the studio public affairs commentator Achike Chude. Good morning and thanks for joining us.
Yes, good morning.
Yes. All right, so the order from Tukur Buratai is get him dead or alive. How much difference really would this directive or order make to the drive to capture Abubakar Shekau?
Well, you were wondering just now about the value or the premium that is placed on Shekau.
Yes.
I would say that based on what the military is telling us about the level of engagement that the military has with the insurgents and the fact that the insurgents we are told that the insurgents are on the run everywhere, and that Shekau is now dressed like a woman, trying to evade arrest, then that would ultimately mean that he has diminished value, at this particular point in time. And so, but again, the army has established this notoriety, if I use that expression, for making declarations on Shekau. That eventually ends up embarrassing them and embarrassing the nation.
Like the 40-day ultimatum?
And even beyond the 40-day ultimatum, several times they had told us that Shekau had been killed. Only for Shekau to reappear some days later in a video mocking the Nigerian army and the country and all of that. So I think that the less that the army actually talks about Shekau, then the better for them. It is good that they have placed a bounty on his head. Perhaps that would also encourage people to give information that will lead to his arrest. But I think it is more of an intelligence issue. And if it is an intelligence issue, then you would expect that the DSS has the capacity, and the know-how to actually carry out clandestine investigations towards locating where Shekau is, what he's doing, and then capturing him eventually, unless Shekau is actually involved in, field battles. If he's involved in field battles, then there's a possibility that in the process of a military engagement or hostile engagement with the insurgents, that he could either be killed or captured, alive. But if it's not that, wounded. But if it is not that, you would expect that it would need some scrupulous, serious investigation to discover where he is.
In fact, many, not even some, many would say that if the capturing or the killing of Shekau would not mean the end of Boko Haram or terrorist groups.
You see, that was why I was referring to the narrative being given to us about the level, of or the status of the battle against the insurgents against Boko Haram. From what the army is telling us, they have been decimated, their capacity has been, drastically reduced. They are no longer as effective as they used to be.
The last kick of a dying horse.
Yeah, exactly. But like I said, this is the army's narrative. We are still having all kinds of violence, in parts of the north. And if you remember also the Wole Soyinka's intervention recently, he tried to give the impression that perhaps some of the killings that are attributed to the headsmen could have, Boko Haram, kind of influence, something like that. And so you don't exactly know. But I guess that we have to take the narrative that the army, is giving to us at this particular, point in time.
From the optics alone, does it seem to you like the military is really making very strong incursions into the Boko Haram territory, whether figuratively or literally? I mean, the army has come out to say, look, we've taken over Sambisa Forest, and especially the Camp Zero, which was the headquarters of Shekau.
Well, you see, the army is fond of making statements that turn out to be not exactly true ultimately. I mean, this is not the first time they had told us that they had cleared Sambisa forest, only for us to realize that they are still, the terrorists are still operational within the forest. Just exactly what they are telling us now. They had told us before now that they had weakened them significantly, that they are no longer operationally effective and efficient and all of that, all of them. Now they are telling us, yes, that they are beginning to build boreholes and all of that. Do not also forget that in every conflict, and even with the best armies in the world, propaganda is an effective tool of warfare, because sometimes you win a lot of battles even with propaganda without even firing the first shot. That is also part of it, and we cannot expect that the army, even in their public engagements with Nigerians over the level of their successes with the Boko Haram, is also not using propaganda also as a means as an instrument of warfare.
But we have to say that the soldiers have really tried, especially from what we've been hearing from others. Like you said, the need for them to be transparent first and not use propaganda so that they don't get ridiculed by Shekau, just like he did just years ago.
It is under the circumstances, it is very difficult for the army to be transparent and open. And that is why, even during a conflict situation and when they invite the media has very limited roles to play, very limited information. They are just limited to the information they are giving, and they are not allowed to go everywhere. Because, what the media might end up eventually giving to the public might be something that would put a lie on some of the statements that the army has exactly made. So there's also a need, even when you have this kind of military engagements, to also limit the kind of information that comes out to the public. But it is also critical for the media to go even beyond what they are being told, to also do some in-depth investigation.
Yeah, but the media still has to, do a balancing act, not to give out too much information that will jeopardize the war against insurgency. It has to be done responsibly.
No, it is very clear. They have duties, and that's why they have, they specify, they give them mandates, and they expect them to operate within this mandate. But sometimes the media also looks at not just the interest of the army itself, but the interest of the country, the general public. So what might constitute an interest, for instance, to national security by the army, the media might sit back and say, no, we need to get this in across to the public.
Of course, that's understandable.
Exactly.
Yeah, but it's psychological warfare. I mean, you mentioned propaganda, but I like to call it psychological warfare. Is that the next phase of this war against insurgency? And to what extent really do you think it will work, especially in the capture of Shekau? Because we have more and more of his supporters are actually, giving up their arms and saying, we're sorry we were coerced or forced into joining the Boko Haram. Some of them are actually asking for mercy.
Well, I mean, it's like I said, psychological warfare is part of the whole process of conflict and all of that. So that happens. But how far? I think in terms of a feel-good factor, there is this general belief by Nigerians that we have seen the worst of Boko Haram. Okay. Do not forget that from the moment that they began to dislodge them from occupation of Nigerian territories, they have not been able to regroup to that extent where they could retake territories anymore. So at that particular point in time, they had been incapacitated. But what they now resorted to doing was, the normal, targeting of, the soft targets and all of that, the bombings and all of those things as well, as a result of their frustration. So there is no doubt that the original plan of the Boko Haram was to overrun, the north, and then hopefully when they built their forces, spread, their tentacles to the rest of the country. They have been severely limited by, the engagement with the Nigerian army. There is no doubt. Our soldiers have fought the way we have always known them, in terms of their ability on the battlefield. I don't not forget again that people had this impression, people were embarrassed when the army was on the retreat at a particular point in time, because this is an army that had performed effectively in many theaters of war across the world, and had distinguished themselves professionally in so many ways, shown a lot of bravery and gallantry. And so the embarrassment when they are now, running away and all, was something that Nigerians couldn't take. Of course, there are so so many issues of weapon and all of that and so on. Of course, if you remember at the time, morale, of course, was down. Their wives, and their dependents were protesting that they are not saying their husbands should not engage the military.
Were hungry
but
at one point.
Exactly, they were also hungry at one point and the rest. So that, I think, we have seen the worst of that. They are now much more better equipped, though there are still complaints about in terms of the allowances and so on not being paid. But the military authorities assures us that they are doing their very best under the circumstances.
Now it seems the matter is out of the hands of the Nigerian military, because from the information given to us that Shekau, already disguised as a woman, fled from Sambisa Forest. So how important is it for the army to collaborate? We know the Nigerian army is in collaboration with the Cameroonian army as well, but other neighboring countries, how important is it for them to be on the same page on this?
They have no choice. They have no choice. In fact, countries of the world, have no choice, because we have also seen clearly that acts of terrorism are not limited within specific, territorial confines. It's a global issue right now. And the ideology is global.
Since
have
Boko Haram pledged allegiance to IS.
Exactly. So you have seen the connection between, ISIS and the Maghreb, between what happened, the terrorism that's been going on in Libya, and the ability to get arms in Nigeria, and what has been going on in the country. Then you also have Chad and other parts of Africa and the rest. So countries are already collaborating. I think they've gone beyond that, because you see, at a time Cameroon was relatively safe. Because they also failed to engage meaningfully with Nigerian authorities. Before you know it, it went beyond the Nigerian border. And Cameroon became also victims of bombings and killings and the rest. So no one needs to tell them about the need for them to continue to work together.
All right, let's talk about the next level, which Tukur Boyata is talking about. He's saying confidently that, look, we have come to the end of this operation, which is Operation Deep Punch 2. And the next frontier now is the Lake Chad waters.
I will not exactly agree with him. Yes, he's in the theater of conflict. He has all the intelligence, at his disposal and all of that, and he knows the capacity perhaps more than us of the Nigerian army, military, and then the terrorists and the rest. But one thing we know is that terrorism is not something that just goes away like that. It could remain. Look, after the bombing of 9/11 bombing in the United States, the American government said that this battle was going to take decades. You understand? We're into it right now. And so it's not something, because for as long as the ideology that fuels this kind of conflict is still there.
And that is the fear, really, the ideology, even if you chase them out to arrest all of them. With this,
how do you chase out the ideology?
I mean, we're talking about the DRR program being put in place now by the government to, help the refined Boko Haram members, those that surrendered, that they were coerced or were forced and all that, putting them through the radicalization, rehabilitation, and then reintegration into the society again. How would you be sure that these people are no longer under the influence?
And that is the biggest challenge. How do you determine the success of your de-radicalization program? How do you determine the success? Is it when a person now begins to verbally, articulate a statement to the effect that he impugns Boko Haram and all that Boko Haram stands for and all of that? Do you take him at his words at its face value? That is the first thing. Then the second one, which is also critical, if not more critical, is the issue of reintegration into what society? Into what society, to do what? You understand? For as long as the economic conditions in this country remain, the parts of this country where you have grinding poverty will continue to be a fertile ground for recruitment of people with nihilist ideologies like Boko Haram. So you also need to look at the economic conditions, the lack of jobs, and the employment in the country, social issues and so on. If you're not able to do that, and that was one thing the Americans also discovered when they went into Iraq. At the time, they were now saying, look, apart from appealing to the hearts and minds or whatever, we need to begin to do some social restructuring and construction and all of that. So the country needs to do that, because what has given rise to Boko Haram is not just the ideology itself. Yes, it was also fueled. The ideology itself was also fueled. People took advantage of that, took advantage of these harsh economic realities in this country. People who had no stake. Do not forget again that we have been told that for as little as 2,000 naira, 5,000 naira a month, some of these people join you know,
the same 5,000 naira that government wants
yes.
to give for social intervention program and some kind of, you know, handouts to unemployed Nigerians. I mean, I'm thinking that this should really cut across beyond the Northeast. Every other part of the country, there is some level of agitation or the other.
Yeah, but you know, yes, I understand why the government made that statement about giving Nigerians 5,000 and so on, but it's a joke, it's a laugh, it's ridiculous. At this particular point in time, I think the government should be looking at ways to get our people, get the factories to begin to work, begin to reconstruct our economy and so on, and then boost the ability.
Instead of giving
exactly.
fish.
Yes, I think that is the key issue. And once you are able to do that, then you will be able to make it more difficult to turn parts of this country into recruiting fields.
And that was why we're hearing at the point that parents in the northeastern part were some were even offering their kids to Boko Haram to be their members at one point.
People do not understand the level of grinding poverty in Nigeria. They do not understand. People have been reported, parents have been reported to sell their children for as long as 50 as
there is a story on the front page of a newspaper.
I didn't even know that. So that is the level of frustration and anger and hopelessness and despair that we have in this country. So if the government does not concrete terms address these fundamental issues, then you're not only going to have the, of course, do not also forget that another negative security imperative is the issue of kidnapping and all of that. These things are also, you know, as a result of the harsh social economic realities that Nigerians
and
are
in
facing.
spite of all of these kidnappings, murders all across the land, you know, the bloodletting, herdsmen clashes, Boko Haram, you don't seem to hear much about orientation on the radio, on TV and all of that. I remember, you know, growing up, we'd hear on radio, you know, all kinds of things that will, you know, be some kind of social mobilization to help people
reawaken your national consciousness
and all of that.
We had that. I agree that we need to step that up. I know that at the time the DSS was running some ads on radio and on television and asking people.
Well, there's an agency for that. But
no, there's also an agency. I mean, they are largely quiet.
Ajike, we have to end it here. The director says we just have to stop it because of the newspaper updates. Ajike Chude, public affairs analyst, thank you for coming to the show.
It's a pleasure, always.